Welcome today, folks. We're going to talk about fingerling potatoes that you can grow both in the field as well in protective cover like a high tunnel or just using row covers. Fingerling potatoes aren't to be confused with new potatoes. New potatoes are immature Irish type potatoes, where fingerling potatoes are a different potato altogether. As you can see here, Russian banana is an example of those. They're long, knotty, not a very smooth skin. And some other ones that we have are like the Amorosa, which are more of a reddish color and all blue, which are very dark purple. And we have other ones like this, like wild purple. So just like in Irish potatoes, there are different colors of fingerling potatoes. As with all potatoes, they are rich in vitamins and potassium and antioxidants. One of those is vitamin B6 or pyroxidin, which plays a vital role in red blood cells, liver detoxification, and maintenance of the heart and nervous system. And this is especially true for people once they get over 65 to get plenty of vitamin B6 in their food they eat. And of course, as I'm nearing that, I'm paying more attention to that. Of course, vitamin C, we all know the importance of vitamin C in our health, but also the antioxidants. These are important to reduce the risk of heart disease, diabetes, and certain cancers. And the compounds that we look at are carotenoids, flavonoids, and phenolic compounds. And what the scientists have found is that purple varieties often have 3 to 4 more times antioxidants than the white potatoes do. So this is another reason. Not only do they look neat, they're also better for you in terms of these purple type potatoes. Now, fingerling potatoes have a little bit of a unique taste compared to Irish potatoes. First of all, they're thin-skinned, so there's no reason to peel them. So you can roast them in a pan just like anything else, but instead you get a very creamy inside and a very crispy outside. So they're very unique in that way, and the flavor of them is a nutty and even a sweet flavor that some people have. And what I've noticed is that each variety is a little different. So some will taste more sweet than others, some are more nutty, and some will even have that earthy flavor to them. Now, as with all potatoes, they do best in cool weather. And when we refer to cool weather, we want this to be in the spring, about 4 weeks before our last frost occurs. And we often think of this as St. Pat's Day. March 17th is the best time to plant. And that is often true. But the problem occurs is that if our soils are wet and we can't get out in the field, we may have to start delaying that planting. And when we start delaying planting, we get into issues with tuber set and the growth of the potato themselves. Having row covers or planting in high tunnels could be an alternate that we could do instead of just planting out in the field. Now, this graph shows you the ideal time to plant potatoes. We need a minimum of 40. If we don't get at least a soil temperature of 40, we're not going to get the potatoes to sprout and to come up. And we noticed that this past year that we got some issues with that. Ideal about 45 to 50. And when we get much past, let's say 60, 65 soil temperature, the number of tubers that the potato set on drastically starts decreasing in a maximum of 95 degrees. That's more like middle of the summer when we have soil temperatures that high. This just gives you an average high and low of the year. You see that it warms up quite quickly in March and April and then decreases in October and November. But probably more importantly is those top couple of inches. How warm is that? And this is here in central Missouri that you can see from March till December that we don't really get consistently in that upper 50s, around 50, 55 until mid-April. So we can get some very cool temperatures in March and April. And this can affect our growth of our potato. But you also might want to see that we drop off late fall, more after the 1st of November, when we get down in those ideal temperatures for potatoes. I've already showed you some weather data, and I got this information from a Missouri Mesonet. The Missouri Mesonet, like other states, has weather stations across the state where you can get real-time data on your weather, but you can also get your historic archive data. So these are very, very important. I just encourage you to look on your local extension websites that you can find this for your state. Now, we had a 2-year study that in 2023 and 2024 that we looked at the high tunnel and also the field. And these are two completely different years. So let's take a look at those. Now, if you look at 2023, the spring was very wet compared to afterwards, and that delayed our planting because we wanted to plant at the same time in our high tunnel as the field, and that delayed that. We also dipped to some low temperatures from time to time, but mainly what was affecting us was our wet conditions. You look at soil temperatures, you can also see that about the middle part of March, we took a dive on our temperature, and we even got below 40 degrees for a while in March. So if we did plant outside, we would have had a lot of issues with the potatoes even coming up. We can use row covers. We can use row covers outside. We can use them inside the high tunnel, and this is an added protection, and we can also extend that season and get that early start that we may not normally be able to when we just plant them directly in the field or even in the high tunnel. When we did plant them, we planted those in twin rows, 18 inches apart, and with the tubers 8 inches apart. And that's just another shot of it right there. And we did the same thing out in the field with the same planting method. And that's what some of our potatoes look like when we started harvesting. You see some of the purple ones there. They're really pretty. They have more of a round shape to them, whereas our Russian bananas and French fingerlings are more oblong. This is comparing our field on my left to the high tunnel on the right. And we based this on 1,500 square feet. Our high tunnel was 1,500 square feet. So we wanted to see what you could produce in a 30 by 50 high tunnel and in the same amount in the field. Well, what you see is that the field had slightly higher yields than our high tunnel did. Because we planted in April, it started warming up a lot more in the high tunnel because we could roll the shades down, but we can only cool it off so much. So we did have higher yield in our field. And we also will notice that there's a difference in planting date as well as our different varieties of potatoes. So it does make a big difference which one that you choose. And when you do buy your tubers to plant, they'll often have a description about whether they like the cool weather or they're more of a warm weather, or if they're long season or short season. So pay attention to that as well as looking at the color of them or the size of them. Weight per tubers were about the same, a little bit bigger in the high tunnel than in the field because I think we had less tubers. Again, remember when we got higher soil temperatures, we get less tubers, but what we saw here is that we got less tubers in the high tunnel, but they were larger than out in the field. So let's look at 2024 results. As I mentioned, these are just two totally different years. This time we did not get the heavy rains in the early spring, so we were able to plant in the field and in the high tunnel at the same time, but we did have some cold weather. If you look at the low temperatures, we got well into the 30s during this time, and that did affect our field-grown potatoes. And this also shows you our spring soil temperatures. We had that dip in March, and then another dip a little bit later in late March. So we did see a drier spring in 2024, but we did see some cold temperatures too. Well, here we are again planting in the high tunnel, and then what some of them looked like when we started harvesting them, and then of course when we planted in the field in March. So when we look at the fingerling potato yield, again, we have the field here on your left compared to our high tunnel on our right, that we see that the high tunnel yields were much, much higher than out in the field. You may ask why. Well, those cold temperatures really delayed the potatoes from coming up. And when they did come up, they got another cold snap that actually died them back a little bit, and so they had to reemerge. The fingerling potatoes in the field were delayed quite a bit compared to those in the high tunnel, which they started growing immediately. Now you will notice too that there is a difference in planting date. In the field, we generally had the second planting date was better because it did not get snapped by the cold weather. They went ahead and came up naturally, whereas in the high tunnel, our first planting date was better. Why? As we delayed planting in the high tunnel, it got warmer quicker as the potatoes were growing. We set less potatoes in. So in our high tunnel, we need to plant early as possible, and then we can always use row covers for added protection. Where in the field, let's instead do this the opposite. Let's plant it early, like we want to, that we can because of soil moisture, but also use our row covers to help protect our potatoes to get them to growing through those cold snaps. But if we look at this more on a yield per acre, that really opens our eyes up too about what we're really looking at. We want about 5,000 pounds per acre, and you can see only one Austrian crescent on the second planting date in the field reached that. So we planted too early in 2024, whereas if we look at in our high tunnel, our first planting date was far, far ahead of that 5,000 pound per acre yield that we want a minimum. As a matter of fact, we were at that 20 to 25,000 pounds. So in the hoop house, we were in that 25 pound per acre range on our first planting date. So planting early in the hoop house, having that protection really pays off on that. And when we look at weight per tuber, we see that in our hoop house, we had a little bit larger potatoes than we did in the field also. But again, that first planting date was where we had the best. So what about fall planting? Can we come in with a fall crop? Well, we tried it this past year, and when we look at fall, we see that the solar radiation does go down quite rapidly once we get into October and into November. So we are going into much shorter days compared to in the spring, where we're getting longer and longer, but we should be cooling down in the fall versus warming up as we had in the spring. And we wanted to use this, our full feature of our movable high tunnel. So this shows you just from a few years ago when we moved it over some raspberry plants. It takes about 30 minutes to prepare it and to move it. And when we do move it, it moves quite well, actually. It takes about 2 to 4 people, just depends on how hard you want to actually do the pushing. So you can see that it can be done very, very easily. So here's our fall crop in 2024. They looked really good, I thought. And our planting date was August 22nd, and our second planting date was September 10th. So still fairly warm weather when we planted these in the high tunnel. We did not go into the field because we figured that we could frost in October and we wouldn't have a crop that way. That was our thinking at the time. Again, this is when we started harvesting in the fall. The sides of the potatoes looked good, but the problem was we weren't getting very many tubers. And because we had good looking plants, the potatoes, they had a good size to them, but not very many tubers. And you may answer why. Well, let's think back. We were in the fall, but our soil temperatures were still high in September, early October, when the tubers were setting on. We just were not getting very good tuber set. And here's our yield that we got. Again, we had different varietal differences. Some are a little more cool sensitive, others are more warm sensitive. But also, if you look at our planting date, we saw a difference, and different varieties responded different to the planting date. And I think it goes back to their habitat. So let's compare though our high tunnel yield in the spring versus in the fall. And you can see that in the spring on the left, they were much higher than in the fall. So our yields were lower in the fall, probably due to the warm temperatures, but our weight per tuber was about the same. So this tells us then that we're getting fewer tubers in the fall, but about the same size as we kind of suspected on that. And then again, why? If you look at our soil temperatures throughout this growing period from early September till the end of October, and oh, by the way, we harvested on November 1st because we were expecting a good hard freeze, and I did not think that our potatoes could take that, and plus they had pretty well quit growing by that time. But if you look at this, our soil temperatures, even at the end of October, were still above 60 degrees. So during when they were growing, the soil temperatures were in the 70s and 80s when they were setting on tubers, and this is probably why we had that reduced amount. So what can we conclude? Fingerling potatoes varieties are sensitive to planting date, some being more cold tolerant than others, so we want to look at that. Planting in early March in our high tunnels produces the highest yields, and remember we can use row covers to help supplement those. And you can get a jump start on the fresh potato market, so in June. So our harvest is in June, so most potatoes are coming out late June or early July. You can from the field, so you can get a jump start on this. Fall hoop house did yield much less, and it's probably because of the warmer soil temperatures. But you can also probably fetch a higher price in the fall for our fall activities like our football games and such. So keep that in mind too. But what we could do is that we could plant later in the fall, and we're going to try this, utilizing our row covers and our high tunnel, or just our row covers to the field, that we may be able to get a good fall crop that way. Well, we want to thank our sponsor, the Missouri Specialty Crop Block Grant, for sponsoring this research. And without them, we could not have done this research. We will repeat this in 2025. And as always, we learn from what we did the previous year, and we will hope to have a good fall crop in 2025. We'll see you next time.